So real quick agenda. For the next 20 minutes or so, we'll talk quickly through the challenges of cybersecurity awareness. We've probably all seen those and heard those in other conversations already. We'll focus on the need to adapt our mitigation efforts to account for the risks that surfaces within our organization. And we'll talk about living security's approach in particular to human risk management. And we'll even spend some time, we'll jump into the unified platform and talk through some examples of mitigation efforts around the risk that has surfaced. So we'll talk about the results we can measure and track with the goal of determining whether the intervention effort was successful. We'll walk through the next steps in mitigation, which is automation, and taking that action plan and making it an automated workflow that engages users as risk presents itself. So all of this with the goal of building cyber resilience. And I want to call out, we hear quite often that from cybersecurity awareness and human risk managers that, they're not ready for automation. They're not ready for taking action. Jess from Forrester talked about, adaptive human protection, and that many of us are many years away, and that's perfectly okay. That's perfectly understandable. And so we want to walk through those steps, right? The first step is getting that visibility. The next step is maybe simple mitigation efforts, simple communications or emails, maybe lunch and learns. And then we keep taking steps towards getting to that adaptive human protection. And so hope there'll be time for QA at the end. I'll try to be quick and jump through here so we can talk through any questions. So everybody knows the challenges of security awareness. Trainings can feel tedious. They're often similar every year. They don't change really as much as we'd like. It's certainly not as much as the relevant threats and information about the cybersecurity landscape change. They're often done once a year and forgotten, so it can be difficult to build that security culture. They're focused on the requirements of compliance. David talked about this, that it's about the completion rate and not much else, and we want to get past that, right? So metrics are about completion rate, so it's hard to know how effective it was. What did we create an impact? Did our end users learn anything? Are they less of a vulnerability than they were? So we want to tackle those things. Ashley mentioned the Verizon breach report, just a few excerpts from that. More evidence that threats continue to evolve and that visibility into our specific risk is critical. In this report, we see there are various evolving vulnerabilities and potential for incidents that we need to be able to stay ahead of, and intervene as soon as they occur, right? And the biggest piece, which many people have touched on, is that the human element is not going away. It's a huge part of risk. 68% of breaches from this report involve non-malicious human action. David mentioned in the previous the Forrester stat that they expect 90% of breaches to be because of the human element. So with the majority of cyber incidents being about human error and the human element, addressing that human risk piece is essential. So how can we have all these tools we've heard about. How can we, pull all that and visualize and reduce risk before the breach happens? Organizations have made huge investments in each of these areas of security, and they have to go to many places to see what the data is telling them. They go to their import tool, they go to their web security tool. What Unify does is bring all that into one place, right? So give you that single platform. About understanding and mitigating risks that arise from the human behaviors and the events within your organization. Before Unify, it was very hard to see this data in one place. So Unify brings that from our client security vendors and tools, maps it all back to the individuals, and provides a picture of human risk exposure from which we can take action and build vigilance and even get to automation, which we'll talk about at the end. So with human risk management, we aim to tackle these challenges head on, right? Provide data and people-focused interventions, have those interventions be timely and based on the data from the risks that we observe, have them be human and impact-focused rather than just, compliance-focused, and give us metrics that matter that we can take and show ROI, right? We can show we did this intervention and risky behaviors went down and vigilant behaviors went up. We can truly measure, track, and manage human risk. So living security, we always talk about the 3 factors of risk. The external threats, those things that are outside of the control of users, but that we need to be aware of. The vulnerability, those are the behaviors, the things the users can control, that users do and do not do to improve their risk posture. And then the last is the impact, which is I like to say the blast radius. So it's the details about the user's role and access and how much is at stake if an incident were to occur for that individual. So in this example, you can see, pulling data from the email security tool, looking at phishing behaviors, looking at the identity management tool and understanding their role. We create a picture of risk that examines real world, malicious targeting, user email behaviors, and we look at their access to understand that overall risk exposure. David talked about this. Click rates are not, they're a misleading metric. Risk is not a single event. It's not a standalone activity, but it's about measuring that overall organizational exposure to risk. All right, so I'm going to jump over to the platform and we'll talk through a few things. Chris, if you're in the main room or heard Chris's human risk quantification track, he's our head of data science. He gave an in-depth demo on how we capture risk and how we really break down those 3 factors that I mentioned. I'll quickly just run through this for anybody who hasn't seen the platform yet, and then we'll jump into the mitigation piece. So by default, the main dashboard in Unify shows the human risk metrics for the entire organization. This HRI is that metric, right? We're pulling in all 3 of those factors and giving you an overall picture of risk for the organization. And you can see that we also split out the impact of behavior and threat. And then we can also drill into the access level at the individual level. So we have all 3 factors and we can continually see that full picture of human risk. So in addition to reporting on this, we also we're reporting on the riskiest segments broken out by segment type. We're showing insights, give you a high level view of the riskiest insights based on what we've determined within Unify from all the events that we've pulled in, and also what the security team maybe has pinned because there's specific things that they want to track, specific behaviors or events that they want to track. So insights are specific behaviors or events that signify a level of riskiness or vigilance based on the data Unify has received. And we surface them here to provide that overall picture of risk. Another way to look at insights is to look at power insights. These are views into groupings of related behaviors and events, often from multiple data sources to give us that, again, the picture of risk. So back to that example that was in the slide where we looked at the 3 data sources, and we got this picture of risk based on the external phishing threats and the users who clicked on a phish, right? So both we have the threat aspect here and the vulnerability. The user has proven that they do not react favorably when presented with this threat. So if I can click into this power insight, I see there are 296 identities. And many companies are doing interventions just on clicks or just on targets, but we really want to provide that overall picture and really focus on where the highest exposure is. So we can take this even further to that access piece that I mentioned. So we have this 296 users who both clicked on a phish and were targeted by a real phish. And we can take that even further to say, let's just see all the people with elevated access, right? That reduces this to 16. I think there were questions earlier in one of the sessions about, how do we not over communicate or over intervene? This is a good way to do it. Let's really focus on where the highest level of risk is. These are people who have elevated access, so the blast radius is large, and they're being targeted, so they're at least their email is out there. And they've proven that when given an opportunity, they may make the wrong decision. So there's a real risk here. So for this group, just 16 people, we can create an action plan. This is a simple but powerful way that a human risk manager can take action when they see an area of potential risk. An action plan tracks the HRI of this set of individuals along with key insights. So with the specific goal of measuring and determining if the intervention they took was effective, right? So then they can show evidence, they can show ROI and answer, did this mitigation work? Was it worth my time? As I said, did risky behaviors go down after this intervention? Did vigilance go up? So in this example, I'm going to intervene. I'm going to hope to build some encourage risk vigilance around this area of risk. So I can click on the Create Action Plan button. There are two types of actions you can take straight out of Unify. The first is to assign training as the intervention. And the second is really anything else. So I talked earlier about the baby, taking steps. And so we could create a custom action plan, which is really going to be a report and tracking the behavior, after I create this action plan for these 16 individuals. And so this could be a simple lunch and learn, maybe an email to these 16 users to say, hey, you're falling into this category and we see this as a risk and we want to highlight it to you. So one key thing I mentioned here, you can track the specific insights or behaviors for this cohort of users. So, I want to track that I want to hopefully encourage vigilance and track that vigilance. I also want to see if they're continuing to click. Maybe I'll also track the combination of targeted and click, right? So I can pick as many insights, up to 5 insights, and track those for these users, as well as tracking their HRI. To save some time, I'll just jump over to a similar action plan that we ran, tracking these behaviors, and we can see that we did this security awareness intervention. We can track the progress or that the users received it, and then we can specifically track the behaviors across this targeted list of users. So we can see, exactly what we're hoping to see in this example, that simulated fish clicked is going down since the intervention. And we're seeing that when people are receiving simulations, their report is going up. So we can clearly show, positive ROI, show that this was worth doing. So we know this works. And the next step, would be to create automation that will happen each time a user meets this criteria. So let's take this one-time intervention that proved to be effective and automate to making it an ongoing and automated best practice. So we'll do that in the workflow section. So again, a way to define and automate the execution of a given intervention whenever specified criteria is met. So they're not only automated interventions, but also we can enable orchestration to other systems, maybe to change access or kick off a workflow somewhere else. So let's just walk through the creation of this using that same example we talked through. So again, for elevated access, we want people who clicked and were targeted. So the first step is the trigger piece. Currently, triggers are defined as detections of insights within the platform, and we're continuing to build this out to be more complex. Maybe look at risk score in combination with detection, or a large number of insight detections at once. But using the same use case we talked about before, I can go into the fish targeted and clicked. So basically, what I'm saying is, anytime a user has been flagged for being targeted by a malicious email and clicked the simulation, we want to create this workflow, right? And I can even limit it. So say, maybe I'm going to send, a Slack notification every time this happens to the user to encourage them about vigilance. So maybe I only want to do that like once every 30 days, no matter how many times they are targeted. So next I can choose the identity. So I can say I want to do this for everyone, but we get back to, we don't want to over communicate. We really want to focus on where the concern is. And so I can come in here and really pick from a number of different areas. I can pick specific segments I want to do. But for our use case, I'll again pick the elevated access. We could also exclude people. Maybe we don't want this to happen to our C-suite. We could exclude those people. But for our purposes, I'll do exactly what I did in the action plan and create it for users with elevated access. The last part of the workflow is designating what we want to happen for the set of identities. So we call that part of the action. And you can see that Unify supports multiple action types here. The first is assigned training, what we talked about. So maybe for our purposes, I'll assume that we already have automated fish clicker training. If we didn't, we could do that right here, right? We could set up a training and do that. But let's assume that already in place is, people who click on a fish, they receive training, and we're taking this a step further for this, ultra risky group. So we won't do the training. I mentioned we could kick off workflows through another integration. We could change policy in SailPoint or make an update in another identity management tool. But this third action is what we call nudge, but it's really send a notification, right? A quick near real-time notification of the users who've met that trigger criteria. You guys probably heard from Jess Burns' keynote. She talked about real-time alerting to fix negative behaviors. That's exactly what this is, right? This is nudges. We talk about nudge theory, which is well-established concept of behavior science that suggests, communications can significantly influence behavior and decision-making, especially if they're right around the time of and the context of the user exhibiting that behavior. So let's move forward with this. I'm going to select this. In this example, I've set up Slack. We could also do Teams or an email. So I'd select Slack. We are working on building out a library of message templates that correspond directly to the insights that you choose in this automated workflow. We haven't released that yet. So, I think in the future, many customers may use those predefined message templates right out of the box, but others may want to just, put a custom message specifically for this use case. So I did type one up so you guys didn't have to watch me type. So let's say that I wanted to send this Slack notification, saying that you're targeted by malicious emails, you've clicked on a recent simulation email, and since you have elevated access, you need to be extremely vigilant and really look out for these things. And to please be sure to report any suspicious emails to our security team. So hopefully this will, build towards vigilant behaviors. We can track those reports, and we can see the risky behaviors go down. So I can create this workflow, and I can hit this, and then I'll basically be able to measure those results in the same way we saw in the action plan. So this is kind of kicking off, and I just started this, so we don't see any results yet. This is tracking the detections in the past, but you can imagine we can quickly get back to the same thing where we can sit back and watch watch the vigilance increase and build that human firewall. I use the phishing example. I know, David, you talked about, you're not as focused on phishing. There are other things. There are a lot of examples here, right? We can do it with MFA. We can pick the users that we really want to make sure are doing MFA, maybe elevated access as well. Create this automation that pings them to sign up for MFA, maybe with the link, and then track that increase, right? We can see the behaviors happen in real time, and we can note that ROI. We could also, there are many examples, but I hope you guys get the point. I hope this is making sense, and we'll continue to build this out to even more complex use cases. But that is workflows and automation in Unify, really helping to build out security culture and vigilance. I think I've left a few minutes for questions, so why don't we jump into this?
Question: what is another example of measures that end users can change that isn't phishing?
Measures? What do you mean by what?
What is it? Another example of a measure, like an insight that end users can change that isn't phishing, like phishing reporting, phishing click.
Yeah, so I touched on a couple of those. So we could get users to build their MFA adoption, right? We could find the users who are logging in without MFA or getting failures of MFA. We could track that with their level of access. That's a behavior we could see. Password manager is another one we've seen and done. We can ensure users are updating their browsers, or this is an example of users. We deployed adware, and we want to make sure that is blocking suspicious browsing or suspicious websites. So really, there are a lot of examples. We focus. I guess the most often kind of vigilant things we see are MFA, password manager, phish reporting. Those are probably the top three.
Another question: how often should users be trained on security awareness training? Per month, quarterly, twice a year, once a year?
So, I mean, I think what we want to get clients to is, when things are happening, when behaviors or risk is occurring, and less about, I'm doing it enough, and so it's present enough. We want to focus on the role and train around the role. Train around when we're seeing high incidents of login failures, or so I think that's been quarterly maybe, but with the addition of as behaviors arise, as risk occurs and is visible on the platform.